Hey guys, it's Avengel, welcome back to the channel, and today we're looking at the highly anticipated Asobo JU-52, or Tante-Ju, Auntie-Ju, or even Iron Annie, she was called. This airplane has had many nicknames, and it was originally designed in the 1930s, and its weird design, the corrugated style, is due to its incorporation of corrugated duralumin? There we go, it's like a kind of aluminium. Now, it was used as a strengthening mechanism actually for the style of body, and whilst it was originally a single-engine aircraft, as we apparently want to focus on that plane behind us there, rather than the Junkers, it obviously saw most of its production as a tri-motor. Now, it was originally a 17-seat airliner, or utility transport used by civil operators in the 30s, but following the rise of the government that shan't be named in Germany, obviously it saw production in the thousands as a staple military transport. Now, it served in the Spanish Civil War, the Portuguese Colonial War, World War II, as we kind of remember, yeah? Yes, now, the most common version of this aircraft, of course, is equipped with 3 BMW 132A 9-cylinder air-cooled radial piston engines, producing about 750 horsepower each at takeoff power, and there are 2 and 3 blade prop versions. Now, the version we're looking at right now is, as I will go outside for us, this is the modernised version. Well, slightly more post-war version, shall we say, with modernised cockpit as would be flown today. Obviously we have the 3-blade propellers rather than 2, which gives it a lot more thrust, and, well, at least more grab of the air, I should say. Now, here's the interesting part. Now, this version comes with, here, we have the standard version, we have the, well, retro standard version, we have the float version, ski version, and the retrofit version, which is the modernised one. We're looking at that one today, but we'll take a quick look at the other variants as we get a chance, and basically go over all these and their various components. Now, there have been some issues with it being a bit light, according to some people. Now, the aircraft, unlike a lot of aircraft in the sim, loads fully empty.
User joined your channel.
No passengers whatsoever. As TeamSpeak yells at me. That's a great start. Let me just quit that. Yeah. Recording professionalism on its highest form. Now, obviously we have liveries with each version. However, unlike the Husky, which had liveries with the wheeled version but not with any of the variants, this does. However, they are quite limited. You'll note the Flyers Club and Xbox liveries there, most of them, and some of them have different liveries, but you don't have the same liveries available on all versions, which feels strange. Let's take a look at the aircraft. Modelling is decent, I would say. It's not spectacular, but it's decent. And for a package of 4 aircraft variants for £12 sterling, or about $15 US, this is very good for that price. And you'll notice this entire segment here will move when you change the trim. Yeah, quite a bit actually, but I digress. Now, modelling quality is good, even down to details that typically get ignored, like tail wheel. It's not bad, it actually looks reasonably decent. Again, that's rubber grommet around the edge of the actual hydraulic parts there. The aircraft does look decent. Let's go inside. Okay, so usual features here. We have opening doors in the aircraft, we have opening windows, including the Junker's rather unique ceiling hatch there. And this is the modernised cockpit. Of course, you can click away your yoke, etc. with the click spot. I don't know if I can do this one. I can do that one. There we go. Now, this is what would be flown today in a one carrying passengers in a modern setting, you know, for tourist flights. And overall, this is actually, I'd say, rather reasonable. It's not bad. It's well made. But then again, all of Asobo's aircraft do visually look decent. They have that down. There have been questions raised about the flight dynamics, and I can't answer that because I don't know how Junkers flies. What I can do for you, though, is take her up and let you see how she flies. So let's get on with that and get ourselves moving here, shall we? Let's get rid of the yoke. Now, you'll find here, this is the rudder ratio. I believe, and I'm not an expert, this changes the effectiveness of the rudder and or can basically act as a form of trim for the rudder. The right ratio, left ratio can be adjusted. changes pedal effectiveness, essentially, and pressure on the pedals. So, not a terrible idea, but one I don't quite understand, so I won't give an affirmative answer. Best I can say. Let's get it started up. So battery and electrics are on. Now, our electrics are all up here on this panel behind us. Now, I will state one issue with having the honeycomb yoke that I do is that I will be starting all 3 engines at once, which you wouldn't do. This is because fuel tank selectors both left or right, and fuel here is idle at the top, cut off to 2 settings of lean and rich. There's a form of auto mixture in this aircraft, so we're going to go to full rich for now. Now, parking brake is on, that is down here. Little T-handle just above the breaker panel. Lots of torches around in here, because cockpit lighting isn't fantastic. Now, we'll move the engine, fuel, lubricant supplies to... We've got oil there, we've got start. Move these down to start. Of course, realistically, you'll be running cycles with oils to lubricate the engines to go. Okay, looking good here. Props to low RPM. Leave the fuel on, full rich. Let's get our pumps on here. Now, we have no autopilot in this aircraft and no GPS, so if you want those, not really the aircraft for you. It's VFR, very much so. You do have a modern DME in there, of course, and you do have relatively usable modernish radios. We'll see the cockpit of the other versions as well in a moment. I won't be flying necessarily all of them, but we'll see them, and we'll see how they operate. Although I definitely want to try and take off in a float plane, so let's get out of here and get this done. Of course, mags to both. Now, unfortunately, I can't start them individually because it just won't let me. See, if I try and change this one here, this is on me. What did I not do? Oh, that. There is a sound weirdness with this aircraft, because that may have started. No, it hasn't. But if I do this, on the yoke, they start. So if I literally go to start, they start. For some reason, it doesn't do it when I actually hold the switch. That's a honeycomb issue that is specific to me, and the fact that I have a actual starter switch on my setup. So if you have that, that can be a small issue. It's going to be tricky to do it otherwise, because it's locked to that. But the same thing happens to me on the PMDG aircraft as well. It's an issue of flight sim control setups, unless you're going through FSU IPC, which can negate all that. So our engines are started up, not in the way I'd like, but it is what it is. We'll set those across there. Leave our hydraulics pumps on, we'll turn the fuel pump off. Let's get our props to full RPM. Parking brake release. And let's get ourselves moving. Now, realistically, I won't be starting this close to a fence, so I'm just going to let the wonderful friends at Asobo pull us backwards here. So we are no longer facing a parking lot full of school children. Because that could be an issue of sorts, I'm guessing. Okay. Right. Now, power up. Let's make sure those engines are cycled down here to run mode now. It's a little sluggish to get started. It's a relatively heavy aircraft. And I'm giving it full rudder deflection there to start, and it won't actually like turning when I do that. There we go. She turns around relatively nicely once you get that sorted out. Hey bus, get out of my way. Where are we, by the way? This is Orbex's Zelamsay airport in Austria. Great little airport, one I used for a lot of my European testing. So visibility is kind of limiting in this aircraft, of course. It's a tail dragger for a start, as you'll notice, or will have noticed already. I hope you've noticed, it's a tail dragger. Of course, we have the slightly higher nose camera, we have a low down one, and we have straight on the panel. Now, you'll see the red arc there. This is an older style altimeter, or airspeed indicator I should say. Why did I mix those two up? That's weird. This one, of course, the red arc there denotes kind of your stall speed. That is where you will stall under 100 kilometers an hour. 60 knots is the ballpark there. So keep an eye on that red arc. It's a little different to what most GA pilots are used to, but it's not quite the same kind of aircraft. Prop animation is a little choppy, I will say. At least more than I'd expect it to. It's a bit like we've seen on a couple of other add-ons where it looks like it's being seen through a camera, which is strange. Now you'll notice I actually have the windows open right now. It's really quiet, isn't it? You want it to get quieter? Let's close those. Pull these closed. Listen to how quiet this is. We're idle, of course, but it's very, very quiet. That is one thing I've definitely noticed, as my pitot heat should probably go on as well. Okay, aircraft. We've got fuel. We've got prop settings. Give it one notch of flaps. And we're going to advance throttles. Okay. Rolling now. And the aircraft's tail will come up naturally. I've seen some people doing crazy things where they just yank back on the stick as hard as they can and it flies off the runway. But I wait for the tail to come up. The aircraft does default to having 0 passengers or any kind of payload whatsoever, so it makes it very, very light. As we come up there, peel it off the runway almost a little bit there. I'm running heavy here. I actually have a full payload of every single passenger slot filled and full tanks, and this aircraft is very sluggish. So it's probably a loading issue there with it being loaded completely empty, whereas a lot of, I noticed, the default aircraft and other aircraft in the sim do come with passengers loaded in them. Makes a big difference, it seems, with the way the sim engine works. So we're climbing out here. Aircraft is pretty well behaved. Climb performance is slightly limited right now, but it's not a very powerful aircraft. Each of these engines is under 1,000 horsepower, so it's not bad, but it's not seemingly great. We're coming up about 65, 70 knots at the moment, and we are getting a decent climb rate, about 500 feet per minute, or just under, no, just over that, sorry, 700, and the aircraft's responding really well. Put my yoke back. It feels weird flying without a yoke here. What was that? Oh, it wants me to look behind me. It's going to find the airport for me. You know what? I almost feel like flying with the window open so I can hear some noise. There we go. Now it feels noisier. Could be my volume settings, but I doubt it because it's definitely considerably quieter than a lot of other aircraft I've been flying at the moment. Let's get this thing rolled around. We're just going to do a little loop here and bring it back to the airfield. I'm going to throttle back, and we've not really gained a lot of speed. We're not up to a cruising altitude yet, so I'm climbing here. And we are at 3,500 feet, by the way, because Zelamsee is in a valley to the south of Austria. Sim performance is negligible. I'm not seeing an issue really with how it performs in terms of FPS, so that could be a given there. As there's the building, the U-shaped horseshoe at the start of the runway. There's the field ahead of me. Let's kick the rudder around. Okay, now we've gained speed. Let's try and bleed that off. It will bleed speed very, very quickly. It is very draggy as an aircraft. Not my usual circuit around, but I want to get time in this video to show you guys the other variants, so we did a quick loop-de-loop and we'll call it good. Now, handling from what I flew earlier, it is heavy in flight. It is got a pretty decent turn radius, but it is very heavy. Okay, so runway is ahead of us here. It might be a little bit too forgiving. When it stalls, this has no stall horn, by the way, the aircraft just mushes and drops. So, not unrealistic. It mushes very heavily and just drops down. I didn't give it long enough to get into a spin, but it probably would. But it mushes very heavily in the stall. And it's very capable of slow flight here. Coming in just under the line. Slip sideways. Bring her down here. Throttle to closed. Wheels are down. Just let the nose come up and the tail go down before I start really applying any braking force. Hold full, stick back here into my belly to try and keep this tail down while I apply braking force. Probably a good idea to pull up flaps in this aircraft. Now, Zelamsee's main runway is actually not that long, so it definitely contributes to that. There we go. That's me releasing the brakes and not actually holding the brakes. So let's go take a look at the classic version, shall we? Okay, so we're here on the runway in the classic variant here of the Junkers. And sound kicked in then because I just loaded into Sim. This is what we consider the classic version. This is the 1930s vintage interior. For some reason the cabin lights are on. I don't know why it's decided to do that. Obviously electronics panel's no longer over there, and we have a lot more gauges and dials and valves, in fact, over here. As those engine cowl flaps. Over there we have lubricant coolers, compressed air bottles. That'll be oxygen, I'm assuming. Parking brake is still here. Carb heat is there. Fire extinguishers. Very old radios. I like how they've given us the difference here between a classic variant and a more modern one. And we do appear to have some sort of autopilot here, which I believe will just hold attitude and heading. In most simple terms, I believe. Don't know. Would have to look. Let's turn that off. I don't know what turned the lights on, but the lights are on. Yeah, I didn't ask it to have lights on. It just decided, you're feeling pretty dim right now. Of course, we've got the classic covers here for the actual engine starters, the pull push starters there for the radial engines. I'm not sure if the shotgun cartridge started, but I think that could be a possibility. I may be wrong though, very wrong. So I will just stick to, that was a guess. Otherwise, everything's in German in here, because obviously a German aircraft in the 30s, so if you speak German, fantastic. If not, tooltips are your friend. Autopilot emergency stop. There you go. So, of course, altitudes in kilometers. Or is that vertical speed? Not sure which that one is. I'm guessing here. Pretty sure that could be altitude. That's our speed. Obviously, turn bank, altitude, VS. And we have two here, which are... Oh, pressure. Oh, a whole separate pressure gauge. There we go. And altitude? I can only assume. And of course, there we have other indicators. Is that fuel? Or is that flaps? No, it's fuel. Okay. But I like this, actually. It's very cool. I don't really have much time messing around with this variant. I like the fact you can strap your feet into the rudder pedals. That's quite vindictive. But, useful if your feet might slip around, I guess. Otherwise, a lot of similarities here. If you can fly the other version, you'll be able to fly this. It just differs in its layout and appearance. Obviously, it's been cleaned up and modernized for the more modern variant. And obviously, Asobo have not included any government that shall not be named liveries. Just the civilian ones of sorts. So, this is the classic. Let's go take a swing by the float plane. So here we are in the float variant, and we're going to go for a quick fly. I've just started on the water runway here, so it started itself up automatically for me. And you notice we are drifting a little bit, because guess what? No water brakes. They don't exist. This is it. Whoa, hello, FPS. Did you say goodbye? Oh, and there's one of the massive mountains in the lake here at this little facility. That's fun. Thank you, Asobo. Yeah, there's some different inconsistencies between the aircraft developers and the world developers. But hey. Alright, let's take this baby for a spin. See what she does. Now, this could be the rockiest lake I've ever seen, so that might be a problem. So let's get ourselves on the step here. Too much. Speed is coming up, and I should be able to pull back and away. So the aircraft does fly a little bit too cleanly off the water, a little too easily. I believe I am currently unloaded, so this is the problem people will talk about, the weight of the aircraft. Yeah, okay. Half tanks, no passengers, just 3 people. The aircraft is clearly capable of doing so much more than that, so makes it really light when it comes to that. But I think it peels off the water a little too easily, for my liking at least. We'll just land straight ahead. Let's make this simple. I'm just doing a quick test to get my impressions of this. Of course, it's only the float version and the classic version, the 1930s variant, or 3039. Okay, let's watch our speed come down. Okay. The lake should be long enough in theory. It may not be, so you may get to watch a crash. But I'm hoping it is. I don't believe we have water rudders, we have differential throttle on this aircraft as well. So if you don't have separate throttles, grab the ones in the cockpit. Alright, let's use some drag curve to try and get ourselves down a little bit lower and slower here. Try and Get the aircraft to settle down and lose lift is what we're after. Okay, that's the approach angle I'm going to want to come in over those trees. Actually, no. We're just going to switch between these to get down a little bit lower sooner. Let's call this a unplanned approach. And there's a step in the water. Nice. Okay, keep my horizon level here. I want to get touchdown relatively soon, actually, considering. Oh, and that was it already. Wow, you're actually high up in this plane. Okay. Float physics, I'd say, are not fantastic on this aircraft. I mean, that touchdown so quickly and so easily. Look at this thing. Yeah, I guess the float physics in 2020 in general aren't great, so I guess this variant's more of a novelty than anything else, and the ability to go somewhere. It's also, yeah, very high up. Be aware of that. You are sitting very high above those floats, so perhaps not something that one would expect. What are my thoughts on this aircraft? Well, I want to like it, but I'm not sure. I will probably potter around in it. But at the same time, I don't know if it's an aircraft I'll spend a lot of time flying in, because it is clunky. Now, the way Asobo talked about this, that it had, oh, we couldn't deliver it this time because there were bugs to work out, and we want to make sure it's ready and perfect. I don't think it's perfect. Will it get patches? Most likely. Is it perfect? No. Is it cheap? Yes. Once again, for a very low price, you get a lot. Why haven't... Okay, I'm cutting the engines because this thing just won't stop. Could you? Thank you. It feels unfinished. It feels light on features for what was promised, and the fact that they said they were having issues and wanted to fix some bugs that were turning up. Not sure what those bugs were, because it does feel rushed again. It feels rushed like the Husky was. The Husky was less rushed, more manageable. This just feels a bit... it's alright. On the aft scale, where do we sit? 5 or 6, if I'm being very generous. Could have been better. Definitely could have been better. And with the hype and the build-up, I genuinely thought it was going to be better. If somebody in the comments knows real Junkers pilots, or people that have flown them, that can tell me if this behaved properly, or should be quite nimble or quite light on takeoff. I mean, with wings that size, come on, I'm willing to believe it's pretty nimble on its feet getting off the ground and floaty on landing when it's empty. That is a massive wing surface area, so I'll give it that. Especially with 3 engines. Definitely not sure takeoff and landing, but it's... I don't know. Overall verdict, I don't know. But it's up to you to decide. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.